Deep in a remote forest, we invited 6 professionals from industry and academia to discuss how artificial intelligence is changing our society. These are the insights from their conversation. Welcome to AI Campfire.
We always thought that AI would sort of automate the sort of dull, dirty, dangerous work that we were doing, which would free us up to do the more creative and fun things. But right now, it's seemingly going in a different direction where we're actually arguably creating data to train machines that can do more creative things. So in terms of where we think this is heading, do we think that AI can truly be creative in the same way that humans can?
Sorry, I've got strong views on this one.
Oh, we'd love to. This is the place. This is the time.
I know, but there's a common question, right? You know, it can create images. Of course it can. Based on the patterns it's seen, it reassembles something that matches the prompt in the best way. But I think it all comes down to what you say is creative, right? If creative is creating something that isn't there before, but based on an extrapolation of past patterns, then yes, it is creative. You would probably say, you know, please design this picture for me, and it will do so really well. You would not say, for my company, please write the strategy document, right? For the images, it's been trained on enough to create something that's really cool, and the prompt is different enough so that it assembles it in a certain way that's novel. For the business strategy, the imitative, backward-looking pattern extrapolation will mean that you're going to get a plain vanilla strategy that reads well, that is sensible, plausible, but will not differentiate in the market, because it's based on all the other strategy documents it has seen. In that sense, I think the more creative AI is, the more important human creativity and the difference, is. You know, I don't want to be too academic, but I mean, if you want to define it, I would define it as that we can intervene in the world. We have the ability to have a data belief asymmetry, right? We see data and say, everyone tells me this is not possible, but I believe it is possible, and then you work at it. That's how we learn to do many things. So I think a lot of innovations are based on these data belief asymmetries that we as humans can exploit. And therefore, I must say AI is fundamentally limited and is not creative in the strict sense.
You're pretty much saying that we're going to end up in feedback loops of bias and even just vanilla thinking that we're not going to move beyond the status quo because all we've done is train machines to predict patterns on what was previously the status quo. So we don't really move ahead as society, right? Do you think there's a distinction, or is there something innately more valuable, something produced by a human versus one that's made by a machine?
AI produces based on what you fed it. I see creativity as a bit more complex. Our individuality comes into creativity. I think our experience comes into creativity. We innovate because we see a gap. A lot of our creativity also comes with interaction, understanding place context. And I think that's where AI is very limited. I think AI is great as a supplementary tool, but we are in a world where, I think that may be already happening. We're in a world where we will have AI musicians and the next generation will buy into it. So it's a mindset thing, really.
This is often phrased as man versus machine, right? And for good reason. We have a lot of these questions about what can be done, and then every time somebody said something cannot be done, it was first chess, then it was Go, then it was mathematics, and one after the other we found, no, you can do these things. And the same thing with music. So we can create music. In fact, there's a very beautiful example by David Cope, who used to create electronic music. And the interesting story here is that the first time he did this, and he showed it to people criticized it and said, oh, it's not really creative, is it? The second time, what he did was he called it Emily. He organized a concert. He didn't tell anybody this was electronic. The music critics wrote in the newspapers that this is creative, and then he went back and announced, actually, Emily too is a machine. So there is a lot of perception question. But the more important one is that in the really difficult subjects where previously people thought that creativity is difficult, people have come around to thinking about ways in which they can use it to augment the human creativity. They use it in the same ways that you would have used a junior team member, and the interaction and the sparring and all of this. They now use this to do this. So then in that setting, is it good or bad? I would argue it's good because it's actually helping this person do more.
It's an enhancement, right?
It's good precisely because we went away from this adversarial framing of man versus machine.
colleague of mine, Mike Aldrich, who ran the computer science department, basically said, well, in the future we will be able to rewrite, the movies and sort of have different endings. And Game of Thrones was so bad, I certainly will want to try on that last episode.
I think any poor performing algorithm could have done better than the final season. Made by Human might actually be the new vintage label we might see 5 years from now, where people want something authentic. And there's an interesting Marxist interpretation around the whole thing about when you build a service to someone, it's more than just the material itself, it's your equity and your labor that went into producing whatever it was that builds that connection between people. So what do you think about where we're heading?
I think it comes down to individual perception, individual beliefs and preferences. I think that's what our society is built on. If individuals have the preference to receive something that was created by a machine and they don't have a particular bias against that, I think that's where that group of people will kind of lead to. I think the interesting question comes with it as well is around the future of fulfillment, because in today's society a lot of fulfillment comes from the jobs that we do. I think that we are at a danger of creative sectors becoming marginalised. The democratisation of being able to do these things and do these things at scale is great, but when it kind of goes into changing the structure of an entire industry, whether it's art or music or film or media, it becomes a lot more challenging, and it's going to be shaped by both the demand and supply, and the way that tech companies and NGOs and governments intervene and provide advice.
Yeah, but it's not so clear cut, right? That's the problem. So if you say, as a consumer, you have the choice whether you want to use AI-generated music and you like it and you listen to it and you consume it. But if that creation is based on training on a lot of musicians, right, violating their intellectual property rights, then certainly, governments should not just advise, but they must intervene, right? Because ultimately you come back down to an outright rights violation. We have to put much more stringent frameworks in place. It's interesting to see when you look at the documentation of large language models that use a lot of data, what they now exclude and what they no longer will do. So typing in, write this essay in the style of, and then you give an author and it would say, no, I can't do this because it violates. I think that's the veneer of what needs to happen, but there will be more of this, and that will probably lead to your dichotomy of made by human versus made by machine, or man plus machine, or just machine, right?
I think it goes back to the augmentation point as well, because you can have an artist who says, create me a style in the style of Drake, or you can use an AI piece of software to support auto-tuning or support identifying small hornets that are in the background. But I think it goes to the augmentation, and I absolutely agree with you as well that infringement of rights is a real danger here, and as is the vanilla flavour of things that we're at risk of going towards.
Yeah, although I think the machines will become much better very quickly, and this whole plain vanilla problem will go away quickly, I think, as they become more proficient, right? I mean, progress is undeniable, and it's not even linear, it's exponentially growing, I think, what they can do. So
I know people that, are in the creative space, they are doing less work but of a higher quality, so they're able to do more with the tools and realise more of their visions. Mm-hmm. However, there is less to go around. So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? With any of these innovations comes with disruption. And if you wait for it to come to you, then you will be disrupted. Or you can realise that it's here and see what you can do to work within that framework. History is full of these moments in which things change and people adapt.
I was on a panel recently with someone where they said, if I knew an employee had made a job recommendation or a reference letter for me using generative AI, I would think less of them as a person. Because he said, I would expect you as like my friend or someone that cares about me to put your own human sweat and labor into writing this to make sure it's of a good quality. But my perspective was, again, like outcomes driven, arguably consequentialist. I don't care if the person puts a few bullet points in there. I care more about the outcome. And I think this is where the dividing lines in society will be those that think it's the process of how you create things that are creative that should be valued, versus those that say it's the actual output that I would like to consume.
I think it depends a little bit on what it is that's being automated, right? So In emails, I'm very happy with the suggestions I get most of the time because, the answer is a simple, straightforward sentence. I don't need to write it. I'm happy to click and say that one. If I'm making a recommendation saying, please hire this person because I know them or I think they have this skill, then it's a completely different class of decisions. And it doesn't make any sense for me to automate that one. So I think what you're saying is that if people can't make that judgment between what is an automatable decision and what isn't, then you shouldn't trust them for good reason.
And I think that's really key, actually. What you just said is totally key. They need to have the judgment as an individual thing, the judgment when to use the tool and when not to. Yeah, absolutely.
Where the judgment, where you fit that in, even in the workplace and industry, within workflows is going to be interesting because we're heading towards a world that I can only describe as human-machine resources, where you're going to have candidates basically using AI to generate like CVs, cover letters. They send that to a company. The company might have an algorithm to basically screen through all this stuff. Then that gets reviewed by another human. So you're a human using an AI that goes to another AI that goes to a human. Like what is the human in the loop really for the future of creativity and work? I think so much of this does come down to purpose and fulfillment and actually knowing what do we want out of creativity and work. Are we looking at artists and other people as basically means to an end to produce things that I would like to consume, but they're basically just outputs, right? Or is it the process itself, and is there something maybe more deeper human connection that you need from these human interactions actually? And again, is that going to be the future of work and what society wants? Something I'd like to end on is this reflection I had. We often think a lot about what AI can do for us as a technology, as a prediction machine, but we often don't pause to think about what AI can't do. And those are the things that make us innately human.